Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us during the Lytham Partners Spring 2022 Investor Conference. My name is Robert Breza from Lytham Partners. During the presentation, we welcome CEO Paige Tucker from ProStar, ticker symbol MAPS on the TSXV and MAPPF on the OTCQX. Today, I've asked the company to briefly run through a slide presentation, and then we'll engage in a fireside chat, like a Q&A session. Before we begin, those not familiar with Lytham Partners, it's one of the country's leading investor relations firms with more than 2 decades of corporate experience. We have built one of the industry's most diverse and effective platforms for connecting small cap companies with high quality institutional investors. Today's presentation is hopefully another example of how we can bring value to multiple constituencies. Before we begin, one final item. I want to remind everybody that ProStar is available for one-on-one meetings later this week. If you have not already signed up, please send me an email at Breza, B-R-E-Z-A, at Lytham Partners, L-Y-T-H-A-M, partners.com, and click on the / for virtual and click on the one-on-one meeting button. With that said, let me turn the presentation over to Paige Tucker, CEO of ProStar. Paige, please go ahead.
Thank you, and thank you for the introduction. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull up my slide deck here. And we're going to talk a little bit about ProStar. I hope you can see my slide deck.
Yes.
You can see it?
Yes.
Excellent. Well, let's get started. Again, my name is Paige Tucker. I am the CEO and founder of ProStar. ProStar is a world leader in the development of precision mapping solutions. And what I mean by precision mapping solutions, most people are familiar with Google Maps, which provides location services based on line of sight. It's a mobile and cloud application that utilizes GPS to get you to a location point or a destination that you're interested in finding. The accuracy in the chip that's embedded in the mobile device is accurate between about 1 and 3 meters. We're in the infrastructure construction industry. Our clients are Fortune 500 construction companies, large engineering surveying firms, and government agencies. In their world, everything is based on what's called survey grade, which is 1 to 6 centimeters. So we've designed a cloud and mobile app that's also based on GPS that provides accuracies down to the centimeter. The name of our application is PointMan. It's a cloud and mobile application. And our revenue is based on a SaaS model. So our clients pay us annually based on an annual service level agreement. Everything's available online on the deck, so I'm not going to go through as far as our forward-looking statements or confidential information, but I do ask that you go through that on our slide deck that's available on our website. So PointMan is patented, it's fully commercialized, and it provides the ability to capture, record, and display the precise location of critical infrastructure, both above ground and below ground, including utilities and pipelines. We have a growing list of existing marquee clients in multiple verticals that again span the Fortune 500, government agencies, some of the largest engineering surveying firms in North America, and we've recently expanded into the municipal market as well as the utility market. We have a veteran management team with extensive experience in development of software, cloud and mobile technologies, as well as the capital markets. My background is over 25 years in developing innovative technologies, and I've always had a focus on data management and geographic information systems, which is basically a big fancy word for digital mapping. A few years ago, when we finished the development of our solution and realized that we could potentially have something of significant value that could scale globally, I wanted to find a right-hand man that had extensive experience in operating large global companies. I had the good fortune of finding Vasa Dasan. Vasa is the former Chief Technology Officer of Sun Microsystems, where he spent 15 years as their CTO. While Vasa was at Sun, it was the largest technology company in the world in its heyday. Jonathan Richards is our CFO. Jonathan has extensive background serving at the CFO capacity for several high-profile publicly traded companies that currently trade on the TSX as well as the venture. Jonathan serves as our full-time CFO. And recently I brought on board Joel Sutherland. to be our VP of Corporate Development and Investor Relations. Joel has over 20 years of experience at Wall Street, both on the analyst as well as institutional sales side. Again, the market that we're focused on is the critical infrastructure industry and all of the market verticals that are involved in either owning the infrastructure, building the infrastructure, or managing and maintaining the infrastructure. Somewhat unprecedented for an early stage technology company to have any number of patents issued. We have 21 actually. I'm showing on the screen 20, but last month we had another one issued, which is a very extensive IP portfolio again for an early stage technology company. These patents cover all the methods and processes that are required to digitally record, capture, and display where a utility or pipeline is buried below the ground. As we know from the campaigning that was coming out of the White House last year, it's a well-known fact that our infrastructure is becoming dilapidated and in serious need of repair and replacement. In fact, there was a $1.2 trillion infrastructure bill that was just passed, of which several hundreds of billions of dollars is earmarked for both above ground infrastructure and below ground infrastructure, including our roads, bridges, highways, railway systems, but also for repair and replacement of our water systems, sewage systems, as well as expansion of broadband. I want to share with you some numbers. There's over 2.5 million miles of paved roads in the United States, but there's over 35 million miles of underground pipelines and utilities. The reason I bring this up is because these two infrastructures are directly connected, both the above ground infrastructure and the below ground infrastructure. And you cannot work on one without affecting the other. What a lot of people don't know is that the utility and pipeline companies do not know where their utilities and pipelines are located with any level of accuracy. So with all the infrastructure the infrastructure construction that's going to take place, there's a high probability that it could impact the below ground infrastructure and cause serious damages. This is what it looks like if I remove the pavement in any metropolitan city, not only in the United States as well as Canada, but also abroad. I refer to it as a spaghetti bowl of utilities and pipelines that have been haphazardly placed into the ground over the past 100 years. In fact, a large majority of our utilities and pipelines were put in the ground between 50 to 100 years ago, well before there was any type of regulation or oversight. There was very little concern about where these utilities and pipelines were placed. In addition to that, they were never intended to support the population growth that we've had. 500,000 times a year in the US alone, we hit a utility or pipeline during construction. That equates to hitting a utility or pipeline about 1 minute of every working day. And when you hit a utility or pipeline, some bad things can happen. You can have serious flooding, you can have traffic delays that last several hours. You can also have dangerous petroleum products that are seeping into our water systems. Or if you hit a high pressure gas line, you can have an explosion. And when you have an explosion, there can be serious injury incurred by either the worker, the public, or in worst case scenarios, you could have loss of life. And I would argue that the loss of life scenario is happening far too often, and that number is only going up with each year. We spend over $10 billion a year trying to identify where the utilities and pipelines are located below the ground, and yet it's estimated that we have over $30 billion of damages that our economy incurs as a result of hitting them. So whatever we're doing, I would argue that it's not very effective. One of the problems is, as I mentioned, that 50 to 100 years ago, there was very little oversight or regulation as to where the utilities and pipelines were being placed. But it might surprise you that in the last 50 years, including today, the way that we map where utilities and pipelines are located is based on paper maps. These are the original planning and design drawings called as-builts, where they have planned where the utilities and pipelines are going to go into the ground. But how you plan for them to go in the ground and how they actually go into the ground can be two different cases for several good reasons. There could be obstacles in the way that they have to go around, or the ground conditions could be too harsh, or where they were going to place the utility or pipeline is already too congested with existing utility or pipeline. So they might place it in the middle of the road or maybe on the other side of the road. Then they bury over these utilities and pipelines and they pave over them. When the regulators come in, as long as it's close enough to where they were originally intended to go in the right ground, they sign off on these as-built drawings, which creates a problem because they become the system of record, meaning they're inaccurate by nature. Another problem is a well-entrenched business practice that has been entrenched in this industry for well over 30 years, and it's how we locate utilities and pipelines. Every state has a one-call center, which by law you're required to call into the state one-call center and indicate where you plan on doing construction that's going to require digging activities. The one-call center, as best as they can, they take all the information that's been provided to them by the utility and pipeline companies and try and determine who's going to be impacted by the construction. Once they determine who's going to be impacted, they notify the utility and pipeline companies that they have to come out and mark where their utilities and pipelines are located. They send out these workers, most of them are contract workers, and they use what's called an electromagnetic utility and pipe locating device, which the majority of the time will locate where a utility or pipe is located. But the problem is they use a spray paint can to mark where the utility or pipeline is located. At best, that marking is accurate to about 1 meter. In addition to that, they could have mistaken a power line for a fiber optic line, or in some cases, if they can't find a signal, it's common practice that because these paint marks can last up to 1 year, to just mark over where the existing paint mark is. The construction companies, the large engineering surveying firms, and the excavating companies, they don't rely on these paint marks and they don't trust them at all. What they do is they'll bring in these big hydrovac trucks. What the hydrovac truck does is that it will dig a hole in the pavement over top of the paint mark and then suck all the dirt out through that giant vacuum system. And what they're doing is they're trying to expose if the utility or pipeline is where that paint mark indicated that it is. If they can't find it, they'll move it over a couple feet and they'll drill another hole in the ground. And they'll continue to do this until they actually expose where that utility or pipeline is. The reason being, you don't want to hit a major pipeline or high pressure gas line or fiber optic line because the risk and the liability is too significant. The problem with this business practice is, number one, it damages the pavement. It's also a very onerous process, very time consuming, and very costly. This is what it can look like when you drill one of those holes in the ground. You can see how congested it's getting in the underground corridor and how many utilities and pipelines you can stack up beside each other and on top of each other. And this is only getting worse with each passing year. In fact, we're putting 300,000 miles of fiber optic into the ground every single year in the United States. In addition to that, here's an onerous workflow process on how the data is being managed that's been well entrenched in the construction industry for well over 30 years. You send the locator out to locate where the utility or pipeline is, and they put the paint mark down, or they hydrovac and actually expose where the utility or pipeline is located. Then what they do is they survey in the paint mark or the hole in the ground where they hydrovac. Then they upload the data onto a PC out in the field where someone has to review and qualify that data. Then they export it back to the office where they input it into their system of record, which the majority of the time is either a CAD or GIS system. Once the data is finally qualified, then it's exported back out into the field where the field crews can use that information to make an intelligent and informed business decision. The problem is at best, this takes up to 2 days. On average, it can take 2 weeks. It can even take up to 2 months. Now, with all the technology we have that's available to us, that's being embraced and leveraged in other industries to significantly streamline and improve their workflow processes, and in some cases even create automation, you would think that the construction industry would also adopt technology. But they're known as a laggard. They're actually ranked number 50 in the world, which also means that they're ripe for disruption. That's why we created PointMan. It's a simple cloud and mobile app that you can download onto any standard mobile device, including your smartphone or a tablet. and we significantly improve and enhance those antiquated workflow processes, and we even create automation. So how do we do that? Well, we take the utility locate device and we pair it to a standard mobile device, again, a smartphone or a tablet, that's running our PointMan software application. Then we pair it to a precision GPS receiver. So this is not the chip that's embedded in the mobile device. This is an external third-party GPS receiver that can provide centimeter accuracy. Once the data is collected onto the mobile device, it goes up to our cloud, which is running on AWS, and we run it through our proprietary algorithms and post-process business practices and make the information readily available to whoever needs it out in the field or in the office in a matter of seconds. This is what it looks like. In this gentleman's hand, in his left hand, is the electromagnetic pipe and cable locating device. When they identify where the utility or pipeline is located below the ground, instead of putting a paint mark on the ground, what we're doing is actually digitally recording the precise location of where that utility or pipeline is located on the mobile device. And then we're gathering metadata from the locate device as well as the external GPS receiver, which provides the quality level, confidence level of the data, and also the accuracy. So in this case, you can see where the utility has been located. And then in that little white box is what we call the precision and pedigree of the data that's being captured. That includes what type of locator was it, how deep is the utility in the ground, the currency and frequency will indicate to us what type of utility that is. We can see what type of receiver they were using. If you scroll down, you can see where it says vertical precision, 1.3 centimeters. How do we know that? Because we can see how many satellites were in view at the time the data was being collected, which constellation they're located in, and we capture what's called the NEMA string data, which is the accuracy data that's provided from each satellite that we're running through our algorithms and post-data business practices in order to provide the accuracy level and the quality level of the data. We're also known as a data aggregation platform. And what I mean by that, we can actually take the data that exists in their system of record and we can push that data out onto the mobile device so the operator can see where they think the utility or pipeline is located based on their historical records. Then at a click of a button, you can measure the discrepancy of the distance based on where their records indicate it was located and where it's actually located. Then in real time, all of this can be viewed by anyone in the office or out in the field. So for example, if they had 20 locators that were out locating in various states, they could actually see each one of the locators as they're locating. They can pull up what's on their mobile device and they can see the quality and accuracy of the data that's being collected. And then at a click of a button, they can consume this data from the mobile device back into the office and update their records. So this is of huge value to a utility, pipeline company, or a municipality because they're asset-centric and their daily operations depend on knowing where their assets are and what condition they're in. So our process is pretty simple. Capture the data, goes up to the cloud, and it's readily available to whoever needs it in the field or in the office in a matter of seconds. A few years ago, once we developed the system and I realized that we had something that could be of potential significant value, I wanted to find what's known as early adopters, companies that would adopt this technology and test it and prove its validity. One of the companies that I took it to is a company called Kiewit. They're one of the largest infrastructure construction companies in North America. And I asked them if they would be willing to test what we have, sign an agreement with us so that we are contractually obligated. And they said, yes, they would test it. And what they would do is they would put it on the I-70 expansion, which is an 11-mile stretch of the I-70 interstate through the heart of Denver in Colorado. It's about a $2 billion project that would take up to 5 years. They're going to actually be relocating sections of the interstate and moving subdivisions, and said this would be one of the most complex projects they've ever encountered in terms of having to identify where utilities and pipelines are buried, and there could be thousands of them. After testing it for 1 year, it was so successful that they said they wanted to test this in other departments. including water, power, and light rail. And then after testing in those various departments, based on our success, Kiewit has now expanded us into multiple projects in multiple divisions throughout the United States. So at the same time, I went over to CDOT, the Colorado Department of Transportation, because they own I-70. And I asked them if they would also be willing to test our software, sign a contract, and pay us based on an annual service level agreement. And they said, yes, they would be willing to do that. Roll forward a couple of years later, January 14th of last year, the state of Colorado mandated our software into state law. So if you are the owner of the asset, or you construct the asset, or you manage and maintain the asset, you're required by law to use our software to identify the precise location of where that asset is buried and provide that information back to the state. Then what we did is said, okay, let's expand into other market verticals. And I brought on several more trusted testers, including some of the largest engineering surveying firms in the US and Canada to test our software, which they tested for several months. And in exchange, giving us market feedback, we added new features and enhancements to the software to meet their specific business requirements, of which all of our trusted testers adopted our software over a 6-year period, and it's now part of their daily operations. Then last quarter, we ended up getting feedback from other markets, and we were even contacted by municipalities. So we brought on 2 municipalities, New Hampton, Iowa, and also the township of Aberdeen in New Jersey, which I'm pretty excited about because a large majority of municipalities in the United States have a population of under 20,000, which means these are smaller municipalities, and a large majority of them will be using paper systems to manage their assets. And so now we can provide a easy to adopt, low cost digital solution to move them from paper to digital. We also brought on Zayo, which is one of the largest fiber optic companies in North America. We got a call from Grinnell College, which is a campus that's over 150 years old, that also requires that they know where their assets are buried. We even got a call from Tulsa, Oklahoma Zoo that was expanding into 37 acres and was hitting utilities and pipelines that they did not know existed in those locations, which was causing serious issues. So we brought on Tulsa Zoo. This just shows how expansive and how broad the market is for our software, from a Fortune 500 company to a government agency, all the way down to a small college and even a zoo. We're also partners with Trimble, one of the largest geospatial technology companies in the world and the leader in the manufacturing of GPS and surveying equipment. Trimble allowed us one of the highest levels of integration than any other company in the world into their GPS receivers, which again created an incredible amount of validation and credibility for our software, but also offers a worldwide network as a distribution channel. As a result of that, several of the major GPS receivers around the world have provided us with their receivers and allowed us to integrate into their receivers, as well as several of the leading manufacturers of the cable and pipe locating devices. Why do they do that? It's pretty simple. We significantly enhance the performance that they can provide to their clients, as well as the value proposition. There's 3 ways we market and sell our product. You can download it for free on the Apple Store or Google Play, and you can locate utilities and pipelines anywhere in the world, but you're limited to the precision of the GPS receiver that's embedded in the device, which, as I mentioned, is 1 to 3 meters. For only $295 a year, you compare to a precision GPS receiver, which will provide centimeter accuracy, but you're limited to the amount of data that you can store remotely on the device. The goal is to move the clients to our PointMan Pro app, which is $2,495 a year. That provides cloud and mobile technology, unlimited data storage. We can integrate into existing systems of record, and it's a workforce management system where you can manage all of your workers, no matter where they are, from the desk or from a mobile device. We're projecting that we're going to do $3 million in revenue this year. That's in Canadian dollars. And then we expect to double that revenue going into 2023. And at some point in time, what I'm excited about is that we should be able to attain what I refer to as cash flow positive status. We need to sell about 2,000 apps to get to cash flow positive status. And we're forecasting that we'll do that at some point next year. And in fact, I'm giving us the entire year to get there. We have about $8 million in the treasury right now, and we expect to burn anywhere between about $6.5 to $7 million. So we should have plenty of capital in the treasury to get us to positive cash flow status. Last but not least, here's our capitalization. We have 116 million shares that are outstanding, 157 million when we're fully diluted. And that concludes my presentation. And now what I would like to do is to take any questions that you may have.
Yes, Paige, thank you very much for the overview. Great. I know we're running up against the clock, but one question is, what is your biggest competitor and your biggest advantage over the competition?
I would say that one of our largest competitors is a company called ESRI, ESRI. They're the leader in the geospatial market worldwide. I have a lot of respect for them. One of the advantages is that we have is we are first to market utilizing state-of-the-art mobile and cloud technology. And a result of that, we can provide a solution that is much lower cost, easier to adopt, very intuitive, just because we've had the good fortune to be able to build it onto a modern platform. In fact, we initially built our product on Microsoft Azure, and we spent the last 3 years cannibalizing our own product and redeveloping it and doing that over on AWS, which makes it even more modern.
When you think about the implementation time here, comparing yourself to somebody such as Ezra, even though I would argue they're not really a competitor, it seems like the implementation time is significantly different here and the costs are dramatic. Can you just dive into that for a moment?
Yeah, again, having the advantage that we're early stage, we're very agile, is the fact that, you know, a couple of years ago, we only had a few clients. And as you develop out the system, you start to realize there's a lot of things in the system that you would like to add as new features and enhancements. And one of the things that we recognized is we couldn't do that on the platform that we were on. So being small and being agile, we could redevelop it on a more modern platform, which number one, it makes it easier to use, more intuitive, more low cost, and also allows us to support operations anywhere in the world, any language and any currency. In fact, we can even guarantee data sovereignty. So we're in discussions with clients that are in other countries, and we can assure them that the data will reside in that country, because when you're talking about utilities and pipelines, governments are obviously concerned that they don't want that data to be managed outside of the country.
In today's world, we totally understand that concept, so it hits home with everybody, I believe, today. One last question for you as you look out towards reaching cash flow break even. What would you say is the biggest misunderstanding from investors right now?
I think the biggest misunderstanding of investors is probably actually what we do and how we do it. I always say, out of sight, out of mind. Most people don't realize the complexity of the underground infrastructure and how vast it is. As I mentioned, we have 2.5 million miles of paved roads. It's now a well-known fact that our roads, bridges, highways, railway systems are becoming dilapidated and in serious need of repair and replacement. But that pales in comparison to the below ground infrastructure, which is what delivers our clean drinking water. It's what helps us get rid of our water and sewer. And we also are expanding broadband, as I mentioned, especially into rural areas because our economy depends on it. And yet, the majority of utility and pipeline companies do not know with any level of accuracy where these utilities and pipelines are buried. So with all the construction that's about to take place, both above and below ground, if we're not able to provide where these utilities and pipelines are located before construction without a high level of accuracy, there's going to be some serious damages. And I mentioned, when you hit a utility or pipeline, some bad things can happen that affect not only the safety of the public, but also our environment.
Great. Well, Paige, thank you very much for your time today. We greatly appreciate it. To anyone out there that has not already signed up for a one-on-one, again, please send me an email at Breza, B-R-E-Z-A, at Lytham, L-Y-T-H-A-M, partners.com, or again, visit www.lythampartners.com/virtual and click on the one-on-one meeting request. We hope you all enjoy the conference. Thank you very much, Paige.
Thank you. Appreciate your time.